The Ozark Mountains whispered her name. Old Betty, they knew her as a whisper, a shadow against the setting sun. Her eyes, two black marbles, held the wisdom of 1,000 seasons. Her fingers, gnarled as ancient hickory, clutched a staff as knotted as her soul. She was the best conjurer in those parts. Some would say the only one. The folks in the valleys below spoke of her in hushed tones. They left trinkets at the edge of the woods, offerings to appease her. They feared her magic. They feared her even more because they needed it. Old Betty, for all her seclusion, was tied to these people. They were her responsibility, whether she liked it or not. She knew their secrets, their fears, their desires. She heard their whispers on the wind, and she knew better than anyone that magic was a dangerous thing, especially in the wrong hands. The cabin stood in a clearing, a sanctuary of crooked timber and moss-covered stone. It was as if the forest itself had grown around it, shielding it from prying eyes. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air hung thick and heavy, a pungent blend of wood smoke and herbs. Bundles of dried plants hung from the rafters, their leaves rustling like whispers in the dim light. Jars filled with powders and tinctures lined the shelves, each carefully labelled with faded ink. This was old Betty's domain. Here, amidst the whispering herbs and bubbling potions, she practiced her ancient craft. Books, bound in leather and etched with strange symbols, lay open on a rough-hewn table. The pages whispered of forgotten lore, of spells and incantations passed down through generations. This was her lifeblood. The magic thrummed within her, a living thing, as much a part of her as her own heart. Beyond the cabin's threshold, a clearing stretched out, bathed in the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy, and there, amidst the wildflowers and tangled vines, a creature of the wilds roamed, Rawhead. He was a razorback hog, his hide as tough as leather, his tusks long and sharp. But there was more to Rawhead than met the eye. He was bound to old Betty, their fates intertwined by a magic as old as the hills themselves. They were two solitary souls, drawn together by some unseen force. Rawhead would often disappear into the woods for days, returning with his hide scraped and mud-caked. But he always returned. He would nudge his snout against old Betty's hand, grunting softly as if to say, "I'm home," and she would scratch him behind the ears, a rare smile softening her weathered features. The air grew heavy with unease. The forest, usually alive with whispers and rustling leaves, held its breath. Rawhead was late. He had never been late before. Old Betty felt a prick of anxiety, a sensation as foreign as it was unwelcome. She stepped out onto the porch, her gaze sweeping the clearing. The wildflowers seemed to wilt under her gaze. The birdsong faltered, replaced by an unnerving silence. The air hung thick and heavy, pregnant with a silence that screamed. A low growl rumbled in her chest. It was not a sound of anger, not yet. It was the sound of fear, of a bond threatened, of a connection severed. Old Betty retreated into the darkness of her cabin. She knew what she had to do. The forest was silent, but it would speak to her. It always did. The cauldron bubbled over the fire, the acrid smoke stinging old Betty's eyes, but she did not flinch. She tossed in a handful of dried nightshade, the petals swirling in the murky brew. A drop of her own blood, drawn from her pricked finger, sizzled on the surface. The forest whispered its secrets to those who knew how to listen. And old Betty, with her potions and her pronouncements, with the ancient magic thrumming in her veins, she listened. The vision unfolded in the swirling steam rising from the cauldron. A stranger in the woods, a glint of metal. Rawhead's lifeless eyes staring vacantly at the uncaring sky. The scent of blood, strong and metallic, filled her nostrils. Rage, cold and sharp as shattered ice, coursed through her veins. The hunter would pay. Oh yes, he would pay. The forest had spoken, and old Betty would be its instrument of vengeance. The full moon hung low in the sky, an unblinking eye witnessing the ancient ritual unfolding in the clearing. The wind whipped around old Betty, her grey hair flying like a storm cloud. Her voice, hoarse with power and fury, rose to meet the howling of the wind. She moved with a strength that belied her age, her gnarled fingers tracing patterns in the air, her voice weaving words of power. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, the trees creaking in anticipation. The air crackled with energy, raw and untamed, responding to the ancient call. Runes etched into the earth with bone and ash glowed with an eerie light. The scent of iron and decay mingled with the sweet aroma of wild flowers, a testament to the life and death intertwined in this night of reckoning. This was not the magic of healing, of solace.